Take it away, Aurora.
Thank you so much. So let me share the screen really quick. I'm going to do it again. Can everybody see that? Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Aurora Duran, and I'm one of the Victim Services Coordinator here at Foothills Family, specific with the Elder Abuse Treatment and Support Program. So I just want to talk a little bit about that. And so really our program offers a variety of different services, primarily focused on interventions for elder abuse. However, we do offer these presentations and workshops aimed to help in prevention. So in today's case, we wanted to really highlight the subject, specifically with financial abuse, and provide deeper information so that we can equip everybody here. And the main purpose of that is because we want to present further skills, knowledge, really aimed to be part of that intervention for the friends and family of loved ones that we may have. So just in case you didn't know, one of our number sources of referrals to our program are friends and families who have started to see these red flags, and they really help their loved ones get connected to supportive services such as our own. So really we're talking about elder abuse, and a lot of people may or may not exactly know what that is. And then there's just a lot of different definitions of what that is, but really it just boils down to an intentional act or a failure to act that's going to cause imminent harm to an individual. And this also applies to dependent adults. So anybody who's the ages of 18 to 59 who's dependent on the care of somebody else, same things apply. There's still federal and state protections for these individuals. And so when there's issues like that, that is a dependent or adult abuse. And typically we're looking at 6 different types. So we're looking at physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, psychological. This also is known as verbal, financial, which we'll be highlighting today, neglect, and the last one. Even though it's not criminal in nature, self-neglect is something that we look at. We want to make sure that people's needs are being met, even as basic as food, shelter, clothing, everything. We want to make sure that that is being addressed as well. So the first thing also is to know what financial abuse is, because we actually get a lot of questions of what it is exactly. And so just like the previous definition, really, it's very similar in a sense where it's an illegal or improper use of a person's money, property, or any other resource for the other person's gain. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But here are actually some of the top forms of abuse. And one of them is theft. Also, we can also consider that extortion. So most often, either this can be sometimes even trusted individuals or unknown people. We would categorize them as criminals, thieves, when they will use a person's check or bank account information, credit cards to obtain information or money without the person's permission. And so in addition to valuables, this can also be medications, personal property that can also be stolen. And this also is an example of those carefully orchestrated identity theft that can, we've seen it unfortunately just wipe out a person's entire life savings for a period of time. And so we want to make sure that we're recognizing that that's considered elder abuse. The other is fraud, and we can see these in very different forms. So the one that's coming up a lot is what they would categorize as grandparent scams. And so it's been popular very, very recently. And this is where a perpetrator will call the person and say that they're an extended family member, grandson, granddaughter, niece, nephew, you name it, and they're in distress and they need immediate assistance and they're in need of immediate wire transfer. Another type of scam is a lottery scam. We've actually had a client who has gone through this as well. And this is where somebody will call them very similarly, either they won a lottery, but I've seen this one with a couple of the Publisher Clearinghouse. Apparently somebody had won.
Can I interrupt you a second, Aurora?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Some of us are having trouble understanding you because you are speaking so fast.
Oh, apologies.
Slow down a bit. Thank you.
Apologies. Okay. So is there anything that you'd like me to highlight again, or is it I'll slow down from here on out?
Let's try to give your presentation a little more slowly. Thank you.
No problem. I want everybody to understand. And so, yeah, well, just as I was saying, the lottery scams is one that we had been seeing a lot. specifically with, and again, this could be a variety of different examples, but we had seen one with the Publishers Clearinghouse. And this is where somebody had won a prize amount, and all that they were requested to do by the perpetrator, is to give information based, their account information. And all they had to do, according to them, was just pay taxes, pay for shipping, and that money would be deposited in the account. And the level of formalities that these people have is very incredible, to the point where it would be very difficult for an individual to even to decipher whether or not this is legitimate or not. The other ones are those internet scams that we hear a lot, but the one that we're getting referrals to are service frauds. So this is where somebody is taking money for work, repairs around the house, that is either done improperly. This is also where the work is not done at all. This is where they take a deposit, they don't show up, or they just do a very poor job. This is actually considered a service fraud as well for our older adults. The other example that I wanted to share is legal document abuse. And so this is where abuse occurs when an individual or a caretaker actually manipulates or tricks an older person into signing over important documents, such as a power of attorney. And so if somebody, maybe we know somebody who lacks a capacity, they're more vulnerable to an individual who's going to want to, who might want to take advantage of that situation. And so there's cases where somebody who's in a position who may not understand what they're signing, or it's fraudulent papers and it's presented in one way, when in reality, these are actually new wills that are being created on behalf of the person. And so being tricked into signing over paperwork, removing them from property titles, or adding the name of other people, other caretakers, so to speak, as people who are going to now take over the home, take over the bank accounts, essentially giving them their the access to their accounts. And so each year, millions of Americans will be falling into the victim category of some type of financial fraud or internet scheme. And so one of the number one clients that we have are exactly that, are going to be other survivors of financial abuse. So we see that criminals will gain trust with their targets, and they use tactics. When we ask them and we do the investigation, when we help with the police reports, we see that they use those intimidation tactics and threats to take advantage of their victims, or they create really great community. It started off as a really great friendship. And so the incredible thing is that because they present themselves in a certain way, it's just so heartbreaking to know that a trusted person that they once knew or they thought they knew was able to do that type of damage. And so when I say that millions of individuals fall into these financial scams, it truly is an understatement. Every year, new reports show an increasing number of those who've been victimized, and it's so important to know and understand what these trends are. So the main mission of the FBI is to protect the American people. And as they align with the Department of Justice, specifically with the Elder Fraud Initiative, they have created an avenue for research and reporting through what they call the Internet Crime Complaint Center. So that's also known as IC3. So just in this last year, the IC3 received a total of just under 800,000 complaints with reported loss of just over $4 billion. So just based on the information that they were able to receive from these complaints, approximately 28% of those who've been defrauded were sustained by victims who were over the age of 60. And so all of those losses amounted to $1 billion in money, valuables, anything worth that total of $1 billion. And this is important because the year before, they saw an increase of 300 million. And so they're starting to see that either more people are reporting or it's becoming more prevalent. I wanted to show you the report that they had. So these were just some of the stats that they had, but they also gave some examples of the top ones that are being reported. And again, extortion, theft is number one. A lot of people also get scammed by saying that they didn't pay for something or they need to pay for something, whether it was a renewal of a membership that they may have signed up a long time ago, and they'll get that information out. So tech support, there's a lot of information or a lot of scamming that's done to update your software for the computer. We've seen that a lot as well. And so of course, these are a lot of different examples, but they're just not limited to that as well. But they're seeing trends of the ones that are the top 10 continue to stay on the top 10 year after year. And the thing that is really important about these reports is the reporting itself. So these individuals who are calling in and reporting, it's so important because it helps us identify, it helps us investigate, and it helps us hold those people responsible and accountable for their actions. So it's only by victims who are reporting these frauds that we can identify these trends. That way we can shape presentations and we can shape community efforts to educate the public, support investigations, and it's nowhere more important than the prevalence that it is now. And so for years, we've known that elder abuse is severely underreported and is sometimes misunderstood. So with the more attention that we bring to this subject, we're actually hoping that we can uncover the prevalence that's going on within our communities. So I'm not sure if you guys remember this one. It was very recently, but it was a very shock to me personally. So I think in the start of 2019, the former manager of Marvel Comics creator Stan Lee, he appeared in court and he pled not guilty, I think, to the multiple counts of elder abuse. And so he, in the last year of Mr. Lee's life, he was accused of stealing a lot of money. And so the court appearance that he had made national news. And while this high profile case made its way through news, it was really important because it was bringing attention to, like I said, a problem that a lot of people may not realize it's happening within their communities. Doesn't matter age group, even then, we're victimized by identity theft regardless of age. And it's also happening regardless of socioeconomics, location where you're at. And so it's really important that it could happen to anybody. I was looking at a lot of research that's going on and that's being presented. Monthly reports from a professor called, her name is Kate Wilbur. So she's a professor from USC, the Leonard David School of Gerontology. And so she's the co-director of the National Center on Elder Abuse. And she states that there's a growing interest in elder abuse. So she knows that there's a high prevalence and she says that people are starting to finally notice that it's a problem. And if they are noticing, it really has to do with her work. So she has been the professor there and she's been a leader in elder abuse research for more than 30 years. So along with her current students, along with her former students, she's been able to increase awareness. She's been able to develop evidence-based interventions for this very complex issue. So a lot of this information is currently being provided to a lot of local resources. So her work is being recognized within the community, and it's been so great and so helpful to see her research being acknowledged and shared and practiced in our daily lives. And so really her overall theme in the research that she's doing is that she's showing that despite the high rates that are still happening in our homes, in the assisted living facilities, any long-term care facilities, community settings, that's still only a small percentage of people that are reporting and expressing what's going on. She states right here, and this is probably one of her famous quotes that she's had recently, is that some older adults are actually reluctant to acknowledge that they're victims because of embarrassment and the fear of being taken from their own homes. They also have maybe a sense of loyalty to family members who may have victimized them and a general mistrust of authority figures. And unfortunately, this is actually something that we see a lot within our programs. So anybody who's been referred, typically they will report the same feelings. So when we meet with a client, we talk with them. Oftentimes they'll disclose that we were the first person or the person who referred them. They've only shared it with them because they don't want anybody else to know because of those feelings. And so we really, really do try to provide support for those individuals with no judgment. Unfortunately, historically, a lot of the interventions are very paternalistic, and they very much, and maybe unintendedly, take away that autonomy for the person, and they don't allow them to be very, it's not a person-centered approach. And so that's another fear that an individual may have, is that they lost control. Once they express that something like this happened to them, they're no longer part of the problem-solving process, which we're trying to make sure that they are. Because we're still respecting the person as an individual, but unfortunately in some of other experiences, things are taken away and they're no longer able to make decisions for themselves. And that's one of the biggest reports that they share, that they didn't want to, out of that fear. And so in a few minutes, I did want to share about how our program has been of service for some of our clients within the community. But I also wanted to share, again, some of those tips and tricks for the preventative online theft for this presentation. So police departments, the Federal Trade Commission, the IC3, like I said, and other entities have been putting together a list of things that we can do to prevent abuse. And so I want to share some examples today. And one of the things, as I say, is don't give historical data about yourself. So I don't know about you, but when I'm on Facebook, I see a lot of these quizzes, these surveys, these images where it looks like it's very innocent, where they will ask certain questions. And so an example that I have here is straight from Facebook. They ask, what car did you learn to drive stick shift in? And so even though it seems innocently, the person will respond. And again, it's just one of 1,000 or thousands of answers that are being responded, but they will put, I drove a 1974 VW bus. Or the other one, what was your first pet and what did you name your first pet? And again, very innocent question. And people like to reminisce and share what their first pet was. And so again, thousands of people will respond and they'll say, oh, I remember my Fluffy or my dog Max or whatever. And they'll share their dog type and just a brief story. And it's just a fun way to connect with other people as well. The other one that I see a lot is the first concert. So what was your first concert that you attended? What year was it? What was your favorite concert? And it's those questions that really cause a person to engage and reminisce and remember what that was. And so, you know, an example here, a lot of people liked, you know, the Rolling Stones, Stevie Wonder, and all these, and they share the date. And so it really gives an opportunity to interact and everything. And again, same thing. What was your high school mascot? Individuals will also share, and then fun conversations within the chat room or the comment box will have that. But although, like I said, it seems very innocent, the problem is that these questions are actually, they're harvesting for answers. When you look at creating an account online, they have very common security questions, and you're looking at those challenge questions and those security questions. So when you're creating an account online and as an effort to retrieve it, should you lose your account, there are security questions that you answer so that you can gain access to your account again. But look at these questions. They're very similar to the ones that we see on Facebook or on other types of social media. And so I'm constantly urging my family and friends to not respond to those, as much as tempting as it is, because sometimes our information is also readily accessible on the internet. So our names are on there. Sometimes our phone numbers are linked to it and made public. Our emails, anywhere as far as location goes. And so if somebody does answer and somebody does do the research, because they will find the answers provided there. And unfortunately, that gives them an opportunity to gain access for certain accounts. But the other list that's available here is the top 5 tips for online fraud prevention. And so the first thing is know who's asking. Right here, banks don't necessarily send emails and they don't text you asking for information. So, you know, if they're texting you asking for a social security number or bank account username information, that's something that they don't do, but they will send a verification code. And this is typically for regaining access, or if you need to change an account, they will send you a verification code, but they will not ask you for that. And so typically what ends up happening, some of my clients have expressed that when I think they got a verification code and the bank, so to speak, called them asking for it. And unknowingly, these scammers have this incredible technology where they're able to have their the caller ID match that institution. And so they really put the frame on, they really do put that presentation that they're calling, and they're able to gain access the moment they get that verification code from an individual. So it's really important to know who's asking and what they can and can't do. What I've seen a lot is banks will send a verification code, but underneath they will say things such as, we will not be calling you and asking you for this. So if somebody is, do not give them this information. So it's their way of also trying to help prevent elder abuse or financial abuse specifically, because again, they're bank institutions and they see this a lot. The other is phishing, and it's been going on for years and it's going to continue to go on. Phishing are those emails that come out and they will have a predatory link where they're going to encourage you to click on it, and can be to accept a refund or a transaction that there was an issue and they want you to correct it, to update information, or to verify accounts. And so when this first started coming out a long time ago, you would be able to tell more or less that these were fraudulent emails because there was a lot of misspelling. There was things that were very incorrect or inconsistent. But they're becoming very, very sophisticated where it's just at the face value, it doesn't look like anything is wrong. And so, when there's times where you're just not sure, double, triple check, something as simple as even seeing the email. Sometimes the email is a bogus email and it's just hidden under the official name of the company. And again, right here, Amazon or PayPal, those are ones that I've actually gotten. I've actually gotten some of those phishing emails from supposedly the original, but once I call Amazon or once I call PayPal, they confirm that this is not from them. And so that leads me to my next tip there is, if you're ever in doubt of who's calling you or who's emailing you, you can hang up. And this is what I tell my clients, and this is what you can tell your friends and family too, because sometimes there's a lot of confusion as well. They're in their every right to be able to hang up and call again. So things like that, calling the branch from the number or calling the customer service number from the back of the card is always recommended versus a phone number that they personally give you. So if a loved one, let's just say the scams that I had talked about earlier, if someone's calling requesting an emergency wire transfer, it really would be important to verify. And this can be asking some personal questions that maybe they may not know, or, just to get by, or you can hang up and call them with a different number, a trusted number that you would know there. And although it seems very urgent and you want to help your family members, I tell my clients, it's really important to at least be vigilant, because once that risk is there, we want to make sure that they're not taking advantage of, especially with the damage that a person can do. Financially speaking, is not worth those couple of seconds of just calling and verifying. The other is never wire money to someone that you just met online. I know a lot of the highlights is for romance scams, but this is actually seen a lot in the just social media community. It doesn't necessarily have to be an online dating, or, this is somebody with who's in a group on Facebook or on other types of social media where there's bonding and there's fellowship and there's friendship that's being connected. And by all means, that's wonderful. We're always encouraging individuals to have that interaction, especially now. Well, we're slowly trying to transition out, but in the middle of the pandemic, that was a lot of the connection that we had, is interaction online. And so we just want to make sure that we're encouraging our individuals to just be vigilant. If they're asking for money in any way, shape, or form, you want to be very extra vigilant, like I say. And so that's also what one would consider catfishing. And so, like I said, that constant vigilance is important. So if somebody's coming up to you and telling you, hey, I met somebody online, or, there's a really great friend. And so, it's really important for you as a loved one or a friend you're going to want to remind them and just to be extra vigilant, just to be careful. So if you start seeing or noticing that somebody's making very great connections or close connections with individuals online, it's just worth just mentioning it to them and kind of reminding them that it's important to not provide personal information or wire that type of money to them. The other is keep your passwords secure. And this one's always, always, always recommended. So passwords should never be the same for all of your accounts. And this is probably a big issue in a sense where if the person has access, the criminal has access to one account, those, if they're the same, they essentially have access to all of them. And the problem is, I don't know, but I'm very forgetful. So I can understand how difficult it is to try to manage password to password to password with different accounts. So solutions that a lot of police departments have offered is to have a password manager. Now, the password manager is really an organizational system that's going to help you remember the username and the password. The only problem is that you don't want to have this online anywhere. There are some password managers that are available online, but a lot of the police departments are recommending that you just make a hard copy. And of course, because it does have sensitive information and access to your accounts, you're going to want to keep this document where you would keep everything else that's important, like your social security card, important documents, estate planning, and so forth. So in the event that you just forgot what that was, you just go back to that paper. Versus having all your accounts the same way. And so I see that a lot with the more accounts that one is creating online, whether it's for banks or social media or however, you just want to be careful that there's not that many consistencies and you want to make it a little bit more difficult. So realistically, we want to do our best to be vigilant and help protect others as well from elder financial abuse. But it still happens. These reports are still going on. These numbers are still reporting higher than before. And so a lot of people are still falling into this category, and it's uncomfortable as it may be. This is the reality of what it is. And so, we do try to offer some sort of support during that time. And, we really focus on our community. Pasadena is a community that we service a lot. We do a lot of the San Gabriel Valley, and there's always an influx of referrals that we're getting. And so individuals are still needing a lot of assistance kind of navigating what that looks like and all the logistics. And so again, these are some of just the program highlights that we have. But in regards to the financial abuse, we've helped our clients, make the reports that's needed. Everything, but not limited to police reports. We've done APS reports. I've helped make the reports to the Federal Trade Commission and whatnot. We've also helped them advocate for, with their banks and credit unions, retirement accounts. So even though we're not legal representatives, we do have the ability to, call and talk to somebody on the person's behalf. And so, we have been able to talk to the fraud departments, and we've been able to advocate for them. And we've been able to reverse a lot of the funds and the liabilities, remove liabilities for these individuals. So an example of that I have is, we actually had a client recently who had 9 accounts that were fraudulently opened under her name. And so when we met with her, we enrolled her in the program. The first thing that I did, apart from all the reports that were needing to be done, I helped her get a free credit report. And we found a couple more that were open that she wasn't aware of. And so with the partnership of the police department and with all the important documentation that we had, altogether, we did the math. We were able to reverse a total of $20,000 back into her account and remove that liability. So we were not 100% successful. There was a couple of dollars that we were not able to gain, but had she not spoken up or had she not said anything, she would have lived with paying back and falling into deferral with the majority of these. And so this is just an example of what we're able to do. Another thing that we've been able to assist with is when it involves the loss of personal property. We've assisted clients getting them connected to fiduciaries, and we've assisted them getting connected to attorneys to help them with the financial management. We, in a sense, we fall in and fill in the gaps, everything from that emotional support, from everything that's going on, because it's daunting. Sometimes they've even expressed it's a little bit of embarrassment. There's shame that this happened, that they fell for it. And so, we really try to fill in those gaps to make sure that, one, they're not alone. This is not the only, they're not the only person that it's happened to, but that they have the support, and they so to speak, they have somebody to walk with them and hold their hand throughout that whole process, and really navigate these obstacles and these challenges. So again, those are just a few examples of what we're able to do. And these services are free. So we don't charge a single dime, and we're always telling our individuals. So if you know somebody who's going through that and they're worried about payment or what these services cost, they're absolutely free. The only requirement really is just these qualifications for these services. And you just have to be over the age of 60. And have to have an experience of this nature. So we have a focus in what we do. And so hopefully, and a lot of the times that really does allow a person to be enrolled, because they're worried about what that payment's going to look like. The wonderful thing is that our program really is funded by the Department of Justice. And so, as I mentioned before, they're really working hard to make sure that our community members understand, and they are able to refer our services. So again, hopefully this information was helpful for you and your loved ones. So if you know of anybody and you're starting to see some red flags, you're still not too sure, there's a lot of great information and a lot of preventative resources out there. And there's services such as ours to be able to help that person navigate what that looks like and the logistics behind kind of the cleanup process, if so to speak. So we're very happy to be a local resource to our police departments, and we hope to continue to gain that partnership, that fellowship. Thank you, Pasadena Village, for having me here. And really, we want to make sure that we make ourselves available to anybody who is not too sure. Everything from as simple as making a phone call to actually starting to appearing with them in court. We've done that before. And so thank you so much for having me present here at the Village. And so I know that there's a couple of chat on here. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. Thank you for having me do that presentation.
Thank you.
Let's see. Thank you. Let me see if there's any questions.
I had a question. One of your early slides said phishing/vishing/ some other things, and I didn't know.
Phishing. So it's weirdly spelled, but phishing. And I think it's just a play on word where it's just somebody will try to lure somebody in. And it's just it's a weird word for a fraudulent email. So it's a malicious link that goes in there.
Yeah, I know the PH one, but the one that starts with a V, I hadn't heard before.
Oh, yeah. You know what? That may have been an error on my part, but it was PH. Yeah. Thank you for that.
It actually listed phishing and vishing.
Phishing. Oh, okay. And that one, I assumed it was the same thing, but I wasn't. I typed it as phishing.
Yeah, I Googled it real quick. It says it's over the phone phishing.
Oh, I see.
Who knew?
Yeah, there you go.
Huh.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to point out also, they used to say, don't save your passwords in a physical location. And now they're saying do, because nobody trusts the internet anymore.
I know. And I think
can remember all that.
Yeah. And that's exactly the same thing. And so when I was looking, because a lot of this information that I get is straight from the FBI, their FBI websites, their reports that they do on an annual basis. And so it's interesting because a lot of their tips and suggestions really reflect the the trends, right? And so because a lot more people have access online, I read somewhere that they said they just don't want access to the internet because it's more available versus somebody breaking into the home and maybe grabbing that. So the likelihood of maybe somebody hacking into that are likely than somebody breaking into your home. So.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the chat that it's also useful to have that information for heirs. Mm-hmm. I've had several widows tell me that they had a hell of a time getting their husband's accounts closed because they didn't know the user ID and passwords or the answers to their secret questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I was working with an estate planner before, and she actually suggests that there be sections in the estate plan that has, like, if you have a security box at the bank, what is that? Or if you, just so that when a loved one passes away, it doesn't create that issue, and it makes it a little bit easier for that process, because you know that person's going to be grieving and they don't have the time or even the capacity to be able to do that. So just making it easy for your loved one is always recommended. So they always recommend just a sheet or two with basic, nothing fancy, but just update it when you do update your own passwords. Make sure you go back and update that as well.
Okay, Lucinda?
Yes, I keep a little teeny tiny address book. And this is only for passwords.
Mhm.
And so it's alphabetical, so I can look up who it is I need the password for. And so it's, you know, by the computer here, and, you know, it's not like all over the place or anything.
Out in the internet world, absolutely. So I mean, I do that because I'm not gonna, I honestly don't remember all of my stuff. So I do myself have a notebook where I can go back.
Sally?
Sally,
I have talked to several young people, probably the age of Aurora or younger, and they don't keep passwords. They change it every time.
I personally, I don't know how they do that because I can't even remember what my password was from 6 months ago. Even
So
if
you
it's
don't
on my-
have to remember.
Oh, you just create a new one?
You just create a new one every time.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
I
what they
can't keep
do.
track personally.
And I wondered if
I
you
can't
had
keep
any
track.
comments about that.
To be honest with you, I know myself and I'm a very forgetful person. So like, let's say for example, my work computer, it makes me change my password every 6 months, and
Right.
I will forget. And sometimes they don't even allow you to go back to what it was, and it has to be completely different. And so maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I have to write it somewhere where I know it's secure, because I will not remember what it is. And if I just changed it 6 months ago, I feel like time flew by so fast and I have to come up with another one. So me personally, I've actually liked that suggestion where they have it written down. But again, you just want to be careful with where you leave that notebook. But I hear that from my clients too, just not having 10 different accounts from all these things and not being able to keep track. I get it. I really, really do.
I saw
Yeah, that
Lenny.
sounds like the lazy man's way of doing it, because it's more labor intensive to create a new password and then go
No,
to your
it's
email
not.
and look to see what code they sent you and then go back in and,
Yeah. It's
Now,
hard. Yeah.
I just wondered if that might be in fact safer.
I think it would be, Sally. That never occurred to me, but I get that offer every single time. It says forget password,
Right.
Mhm.
and then you have that option. It takes 3 seconds. That's
Right.
actually a pretty cool idea. I had a question.
Yeah.
Aurora, where do you get most of your referrals? Do you get them from families or from professionals, or how do they come in?
Yeah, so again, we see different trends. So during the height of the pandemic, we were getting a lot of referrals from family members. And so this had a lot to do with the outreach that we were doing. A lot of people will assume that we're only reaching out to our older adult community, but we were reaching out to family, friends, because I mean, we all have an older loved one that we care about. And so those referrals really came in when we would do small educational workshops. It started reminding them, hey, you know what, this is sounding like it. And they would go home and ask, and this is something that they had. But we also get a lot of referrals. More now, this last couple of weeks, we've been getting a lot from the police department, financial crimes unit. We've made wonderful partnerships with Adult Protective Services, which has been incredible because we fill in a lot of the gaps that they can't. So it's really, we're getting referrals everywhere, but the trends, number one trends is friends and family, and those entities such as the police department and Adult Protective Services.
But that's great to know about APS. I like
Yes,
that relationship. Sounds
it's been really great. It's been very amazing partnering with those social workers on staff.
thanks.
I have a question about, do you have any data which would let you know how many of these victims, I'll say, have somewhat diminished capacity?
Oh, you know what? That would be really interesting. I would imagine, I remember getting a lot of information in previous reports and research that I was doing from Alzheimer's Association. A lot of those individuals had in one form or another have also been victims of that. And now that's a two form, right? We're wanting to take care of their health and their well-being, but also the more the logistical side as far as case management goes. So I would imagine that that would be my go-to place for initial research. But again, the number one thing is how accurate is this research, because sometimes it's underreported. So the numbers that we have, it's almost as if we have to project a certain percentage, because we're looking at hopefully more people will be able to come out with their own experiences. But there's the high correlation with that. When there's a lower capacity of an individual, the higher risk of any type of abuse, whether financial, physical, or verbal, also goes up. So they're more vulnerable, so to speak.
Katie, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. And so I saw one of those posts on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook very often, but it said, what was the car, make and model that you drove or whatever. And one of my friends, who's probably in her 80s, she answered it. And I just thought, oh, that's weird. She answered it. I mean, is there a way you can kindly say to someone, that's really not a good idea? I mean, is there a way that we can be advocates without being like,
Yeah.
don't engage?
I know. And I think it really just, where does it come from? Because I think a lot of the times we think of it like it's scolding, but no, I think if we're reaching out from a very genuine place, say, hey, you know what, I noticed that your comment came out, I'm glad that you were able to participate. But the way that I tell my families, I say, you know what, look, I just want you to be careful, because when you start looking at these questions, they're common for security questions. And so I just want you to be very careful. I participate, but maybe not comment. And so I give them, honestly, I have these photos in my screenshots. So sometimes I'll even give examples of what that is, but I cannot, once I figure that out, and once I realized, I started with whole new eyes. I started seeing those quizzes in a very different light. And so in a very kind and genuine way, I would, just let them know. People are typically more receptive to that versus like, shame on you, you're not supposed to do that. And, we never want to do that anyways. And I know that's not where you're coming from, but people are a little bit more receptive to know if it's coming from a very kind and well-being place for their care.
Thank you.
The ones that I find very deceptive are the ones you gave examples for that have the company logo on them. And they're better edited than the original ones. So you can tell they weren't written by somebody who doesn't speak English as a first language.
Yeah,
but
they're so sophisticated.
very deceptive and very, very easy to fall for those.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any strategies for how to persuade people not to answer the phone if they don't know who it is?
Exactly. And I think that's the hardest part too, because it's hard, because depending on whether it's a landline, some of my clients, for example, have phones where they don't have a caller ID, but even then it's the caller ID is irrelevant, because they're able to manipulate what it looks like. And so even just suggesting that they let them, the calling person, the calling party, leave a voicemail. If it's important, if it's somebody that they recognize, or it's not necessarily an urgent matter, but they were going to request a call back, they're typically going to leave a voice message. And so just a simple recommendation is just let it go to voicemail, see who it is. And I've had a few clients who do that. When I call them, I know I'm directly going to leave a voicemail, and then they'll answer once they know it's me. Or they have the ability to block numbers on their landlines or their phones. And so if it's a number that they just don't recognize, they just won't answer, but they'll know the safe people, friends, family, and then they'll be able to answer those. But the hardest ones are the phones that don't have that caller ID, or you're just not really sure who's giving you that call. So basic recommendation is just let it go to voicemail, check it. And if it's a important or it's a known trusted person, it's a safe person to call back.
Are there some phones that can't get caller ID? Or it's just they haven't set it up?
Either that, some landlines still don't have that screen. Some of the phones, like the cell phones now have that ability to do that, but some clients still have phones that don't have that ability.
A lot of older people don't have updated equipment, so they don't, and they don't know how to program it. So, if you say, oh, well, just put that in your phone and block it. I don't know. How to
Mhm.
Yeah.
I've actually had moments where I've had to manually block them. So I had to look at the little manual from the telephone and block some of those numbers because, for example, this particular client had been receiving a lot of calls from this particular scammer. And so all the different numbers that they were calling from, I went ahead and I used their the phone option buttons and I blocked those numbers for her. So she's picked up the practice of just letting it go to voicemail. And so trusted people that she knows, she will call back. If not, she will allow those voicemails to just pile up and she won't respond.
Good.
Yeah, from my experience as a social worker, in the present tense, Lenny, when I was still working, we would go out and see members of Kaiser who had gotten into trouble. And they were, since I worked in a geriatric team, they were all older. And I would say 95%, if not more, had some kind of cognitive issues, which is why they got into trouble.
Yeah.
It's really a small minority of people that got into trouble financially, abuse-wise, that you know, didn't have any dementia. They were just hoodwinked. But the other people had definite issues. Sally, to get back to your question.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Wayne. And it's more complicated in trying to help those people.
Yeah.
Definitely. And trying to get somebody with cognitive impairment to not answer the phone, forget
Right,
it.
exactly.
You know, and I even think that this brings up conversations to have with our loved ones even before, because, you know, we want to make sure that documents and proper preparation as far as paperwork, power of attorneys are set in place. Because I've even experienced where there's complications even trying to set that paperwork for a very logistical and very trusted process. But at this point, the neurologist or the doctor has already said, no, you know, there's no capacity for them to even consent at this point. And so that makes it very, very challenging. And so even just having that conversation with our loved ones to see if this is, you know, having that documentation already set into place, because once that time frame or that ability is reached a certain point, I've seen it be very challenging to try to kind of prevent anymore.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question actually about the security questions that a lot of online accounts require us to create. Sometimes it's not an option. They make you go through that step. If you are recording security information in a small book, do you think it's a good idea to come up with a list of fake responses that aren't relevant to your actual history, but that you just use for security answers?
I mean, I think that's always an option as long as you just remember it.
Actually, that's a good idea.
Yeah, you can absolutely. I don't think that they're going to verify that your high school mascot was indeed an Aztec or a Bronco. And so I think you're more than welcome, because that's also a great, you know, great recommendation. So just as long as you can remember when you were truthful about the answers and when you were not, because you don't want to log yourself out either. I think that's the worst case scenario, when it's really you and you yourself cannot access because you've logged yourself out. I've been in that situation and it's terrible.
I love that idea. That's
Yeah.
They got a whole new life.
Yeah.
Barbara, do you have a question or a comment? No? Okay. Okay, well, I think if there's nothing else, we can probably wrap it up.
Thank you.
Aurora, thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurora.
Thank you for having me. This was great. And please invite me again. This was great. I would love to be part of listening to other presentations and see part of the community. So thank you again so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Please do. Tomorrow we have Stop the Hate Compassion in STV. It's a new organization that's helping members of the AAPI community have companions as they walk. I think it's a beautiful organization. We're so excited to partner with them. And then we have upcoming presentations on preventing skin cancer, preventing
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'll be there.
and gut health about colon cancer. So
Wow.
great ones in the works as well. So we hope
I'm so happy, yeah, what you guys do. So thank you so much. I get to be part of it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Great to see.
Bye.
Hey, thank you, everybody, for coming.
Bye-bye. Yes.
Will you stop the recording, Wayne?
I want to sing.